Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and drop a trigger warning before we get into this video because we are unfortunately going to have to be watching the ghoul of all ghouls, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And not only are we going to have to be listening to Hillary Clinton today, but she is also going to be specifically railing against the left and progressives in Congress. So I wanted to bring you guys this clip to show you exactly the brain rot that exists within the Democratic establishment, because what she's about to say here is completely wrong and disprovable on so many different levels, and it, ties into the same enlightened centrist narrative that we have been hearing throughout the entirety of the Joe Biden administration. But this basically gets to exactly why Democrats are fucked for 2022 and 2024, because they are going to be listening to absolute ghouls like this and heading with the exact opposite strategy that they actually should be. So let's just go ahead and get into this clip, and I'm gonna have to be interjecting because it's a complete shit show from top to bottom.
There's always consternation and hand-wringing about the Democratic Party. Is it too progressive? Should the centrists win the day? If you look at the way, I don't have to tell you this, presidential campaigns are won, whether it's your husband or Joe Biden, they tend to understand where the middle is while keeping progressives close. So where do you think the Democratic Party is right now? Because there are people who say the lesson of, say, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia was that he grabbed some of those independents and those centrists, and that maybe the campaign Terry McAuliffe ran was too far left. So what do you see as the state of the Democratic Party right now?
Okay, already I gotta pause before she actually gets into her response here, because two things that this reporter or this journalist, I don't even know how he would refer to himself, but the guy who is asking this question, two things already in the premise of his question are completely disprovable at face value. Number one is that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left, okay? The Democratic Party right now under the Joe Biden administration in his first year, just based on the legislation that they have actually succeeded in getting passed, is significantly to the right of the vast majority of the country, okay? I don't need to remind you guys this, but the vast majority of the country supports policies like Medicare for all, and Joe Biden not only isn't passing a policy like Medicare for all, but he's not even talking about the fucking public option that he ran on that was supposed to be the enlightened centrist policy that was going to be easy to get through. So we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have nearly 1 million Americans that have died due to COVID, and not only are we not talking about a universal healthcare system, but Joe Biden isn't even talking about doing his half-assed, watered-down plan that he ran on, okay? So, we have so many different examples of how he has failed to actually deliver on the material relief that he ran on, which in and of itself was already half-assed and watered down, but, he's not even succeeding on that front. So to say that he's too far left is just, you're not even looking at what the American people want, if that's the conclusion that you are coming to. And the second point that he makes there is about Terry McAuliffe, okay? Listen, this guy Terry McAuliffe, to say that he was running a left-wing campaign is completely delusional. Not only was he not running on actually delivering material improvements to people's lives, but he was actually just running an entirely anti-Trump campaign in an election that Donald Trump was not running in, okay? So this is the strategy that Democrats are probably going to be using at least in 2024, if not 2022 as well. But how the fuck are you going to run an anti-Trump campaign in an election that has basically nothing to do with Donald Trump? I mean, I wonder why people were not excited to show up for you. You see here from Politico, Terry McAuliffe bet on voters hating Trump. Turns out they dislike Democrats more. No shit. Everybody sees what's going on. We see the corruption within the Democratic Party right now and how they're unable and completely incompetent to pass their own agenda. So yeah, no shit. People see right through the fraud of the Democratic Party and understand that they have to actually deliver on something instead of just saying we're not as bad as the other guy. And it wasn't just like, the type of rhetoric that he was using or anything. He was going all balls out, okay, in an anti-Trump style campaign strategy basically. But you see here, a tricky mailer from Democrats flaunts Trump's endorsement of Youngkin. So not only was he running an anti-Trump campaign primarily, but he was literally sending out pro-Trump mailers to voters in Virginia, okay? This is how insane the brain rot is within the Democratic Party. They think you can literally go out and advertise for your opponent, and that's an effective election strategy. It's just completely delusional. But now we get to Hillary Clinton's response and synopsis of that completely ridiculously premised question.
I think that it is a time for some, careful thinking about what wins elections, and not just in deep blue districts where a Democrat and a liberal Democrat or so-called progressive Democrat is going to win. First of all, we don't know what the state of the map is going to be after all of the redistricting. It appears as though the Republicans in a number of states are doing their best to eliminate as many seats that Democrats can be competitive in. And so we've got to be very clear-eyed about what it's going to take to hold the House and the Senate in 2022 and to win the Electoral College, because also Republicans are doing everything they can to create an environment in which winning the Electoral College, even narrowly the way Joe Biden did, will be out of reach for a Democrat.
Okay, this part just real quick, she is technically right about this, how Republicans are doing this, nationwide assault on democracy, if you want to call what we have here a democracy. Yes, they are passing extremely restrictive voting laws all around the country, but part of the reason why that is able to happen right now, basically, is entirely due to the so-called moderates or centrists like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who are opposed to getting rid of the filibuster to actually pass voting rights legislation. So again, if you're worried about the voting situation in 2022 and 2024, you should be looking at Joe Manchin to get the fuck out of the way. But now we're going to see how she proceeds to blame progressives for the inaction that we have seen in Congress.
So I understand why people want to argue for their priorities. That's what they believe they were elected to do. But at the end of the day, nothing is going to get done if you don't have a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate. And our majority comes from people who win in much more difficult districts. And our majority in the Senate comes from people who can win in not just blue states and hold those wins, as we saw didn't happen in Virginia, but can win in more purplish states.
Yeah, Hillary Rodham Clinton, famously good at winning in purplish states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. Yeah, famously good at winning in purple states, Hillary Clinton. Okay, again, just to remind you guys, I'm sure you all know this, but part of the reason why she lost in 2016 to Donald Trump is specifically because she lost these Midwestern states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And a large reason why these voters abandoned her for a fake right-wing populist like Donald Trump is because he was railing against the corruption through things like NAFTA that exported a lot of our industrial and manufacturing jobs overseas to places like China. Hillary Clinton aggressively supported things like NAFTA and PNTR. The Iraq War is another big one. So all of these different policies that have completely gutted and eviscerated these communities within the Midwest, that's part of the reason why you lost in these purple states. So please tell me exactly how your centrist strategy or your neoliberal strategy is effective in purple states. It's just completely delusional, but she continues on here.
So, look, I'm all about having vigorous debate. I think it's good, and it gives people a chance to be part of the process. But at the end of the day, it means nothing if we don't have a Congress that will get things done, and we don't have a White House that we can count on to be sane and sober and stable and productive.
Okay, so I'm just going to cut it off here. She continues to ramble about the same general concepts, but listen to what she just said, okay? She just said none of this matters, right? None of this political theater that we've been seeing over the last year, specifically primarily on Build Back Better and also the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But she's saying basically that all of this political theater, the back and forth that we've been witnessing, okay, they basically mean nothing if we can't produce something in the end that people are going to feel in their everyday to day lives. And yeah, I agree that that's true in and of itself, but who is the reason for that? The entire reason why the American people are not getting the actual relief that Joe Biden, another enlightened centrist, that he ran on. The reason why that's not getting passed is because of motherfuckers like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and Josh Gottenheimer in the House and other corporate Democrats that are standing in the way. Corporate Democrats who are ideologically exactly in line with you, Hillary Clinton, okay? Not in line with Bernie Sanders or AOC. They are not the ones who have been blocking any of this agenda, okay? In fact, the progressives, to a fault on this specific point, progressives in the House especially, to a fault, trusted Joe Biden and trusted Joe Manchin and were fighting for basically Joe Biden's agenda throughout this entire process, and they got absolutely fucked for doing that, okay? They weren't fighting for Bernie Sanders' agenda, they weren't fighting for AOC's agenda, they were fighting for Joe Biden's already half-assed and watered-down agenda, and even that was not enough to satisfy the corporate ghouls of Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and the rest of them. So to spin this around in any way, shape, or form, as if progressives are the ones that lose elections, is just completely delusional, or that progressives are the ones that are stalling action in Congress. You would have to not be paying attention at all to come to that conclusion. But you see here as well, just to give you a perspective in terms of the electoral success of progressives, every single one. Ocasio-Cortez notes that every Democrat who backed Medicare for All won re-election in 2020. So obviously, policies like Medicare for All that again are overwhelmingly supported by the majority of the American people, policies like this, when you run on that, when you run on giving people universal health care that is free at the point of service, medical costs being one of the leading causes, if not the single highest cost or causes of bankruptcy in the United States. Of course, people are going to support you if you promise to deliver material concessions that will actually improve their lives. Surprising, I know it's this radical concept, but instead of leaning into things like this, people like Hillary Clinton want the Democratic Party to move further into like bullshit culture war issues and centrism, where you don't really get anything done and you promised a half-assed agenda that you don't even intend on passing that half-assed agenda, which is exactly what we have seen from Joe Biden and which is exactly what we would have also seen under a Hillary Clinton administration if she had actually won. So this idea that this do-nothing neoliberalism is going to actually succeed as an election strategy, or that it's going to succeed in actually getting things done, has been easily disproven over the entire course of Joe Biden's first year, as we've seen all of his agenda get completely eviscerated by his own party with basically no pushback. And again, just to hammer home on this point, okay, these motherfuckers, when you ask these questions and you define Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema as these centrists, they are not centrists. They are not moderates by any stretch of the imagination, okay? I've shown you guys this poll a million times over, but even at the $3.5 trillion number, West Virginia voters and voters around the entire United States overwhelmingly supported the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better bill. Then they cut it in half to $1.75 trillion, and even that is being blocked by Joe Manchin. And he has the audacity to go out there and say that he is fighting for his conservative constituents. His conservatives, according to like actual accurate definitions, don't fucking support him, okay? So a real definition of Joe Manchin would not be moderate or centrist. He's not moderate or centrist relative to the American people or relative to even people in West Virginia. He's a centrist in the sense that, yes, he stands in the middle of a completely corrupted DC swamp, but that's not the same as being a centrist or a moderate amongst the American people. If he was actually truly a moderate amongst his own constituents, then he would have supported the initial $3.5 trillion bill, but he doesn't. Why? Because he's entirely corrupted, just like Joe Biden is, and just like Nancy Pelosi is, and just like Chuck Schumer is, and just like Hillary Rodham Clinton is. So listen, I mean, these motherfuckers are not going to learn a single lesson from the 2020 election or the 2016 election, which Hillary Clinton still thinks that she was like, wrongfully defeated, or that there was some sabotaging that caused her to lose instead of her completely hollowed out, pathetic neoliberal agenda that she was running on. I mean, the fact that they're even asking her to make a masterclass series, as she was talking about in that clip, or the fact that she's even coming out and doing interviews about election strategy, okay? This is a person who lost to the single most obvious con man in human history in Donald Trump, okay? Not the type of person who you should be asking her opinion on goddamn anything.